Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, as you join us into this webinar on Beyond the Problem, looking at solutions for impactful media in the African continent. It is such a pleasure to have you all, and we're looking forward to a very engaging and interactive session. So as you join in, please feel free to share your name as well as where you are joining us from in the chat function here on Zoom. And you can also share what you're looking forward to learn from this discussion. I am Bongiwe Tutu, COO to the Frame Media Foundation, and I'm very excited to be having this engagement with you all. As we have noted, this is going to be an interactive session, so please do feel free to engage with us and the speakers, and also to raise your hands should you want to share your comments or questions vocally. We are looking at the critical role of journalism in exposing injustice, shortfalls, and mismanagement in Africa and globally. And within this appreciation is the growing news fatigue that we are experiencing. This is toppled by mistrust, by audiences, and these are the limits of reporting that is merely focused on problems alone. So we are here to explore and examine and assess how solutions journalism can strengthen accountability reporting by examining credible responses to social challenges, as well as probing what works, what doesn't, and why. I am also honored to have our guest speakers with me who are going to be helping us unpack this discussion because solutions journalism begins from the editorial standpoint in order for it to be implemented accordingly. And so their full and exceptional bios are shared on screen and are also available on our website for your further reading of their compelling work and portfolios. Thank you so much, Mary Mwendwa, the editor of Talk Africa, as well as Churchill Otieno, the president of the African Editors Forum. Thank you and welcome, Mary and Churchill. We are looking forward to hearing more from you. It's a great honor. Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Uh,
Thank you. Thank you, Bongiwe.
Thank you so much, Churchill. And so we will begin the program on introductions on what solutions journalism in, and I'll be facilitating that session. And then we're going to be going into practical insights from the African editorial perspective. And there we're going to be hearing from Mary Mwendwa as well as Churchill Otieno on how do we find solutions stories in everyday reporting. They'll also be telling us on applying investigative rigor to solutions, as well as pitching, editing, and publishing solutions journalism. Thereafter, we're going to have the discussion and Q&A session and some final tips and takeaways in closing. So we looked at, upon your registration, we asked you all to share with us the outcomes that you would like to gain from this webinar. And we were very thrilled to get these kinds of results coming in, how you are all looking to learn and gain insights on solutions journalism. A number of you would noted of how you are looking to gain some insight and practical skills, how you want to use this as a networking platform and gain more knowledge, how you want to gain more understanding on solutions journalism, and how you would like to identify the synergies for advocacy on safety of journalists and on covering climate and the environment. A number of you were also noting how you would like to gain some awareness to be able to interact with fellow participants, to have some practical application of solutions journalism, and to learn how to deal with challenges in newsrooms and how to get more community involvement on the stories that affect them. Others shared how they are looking to gain some practical know-hows on using solutions journalism towards their online publications, and as well to identify the key features of solutions journalism. So I'd like you to reflect on these outcomes that you noted you would like to gain from this webinar and keep probing with us and our guest speakers as we go into the program to ensure that you receive the outcome that you really would like to attain from this engagement. And we're also thrilled to be a stepping stone towards your attaining of these outcomes. So within my presentation, it's going to be short so that we have more time for engagement as well as interacting among each other and with our speakers. So I'll be looking at what is solutions journalism, which is also known as SoJo. And we'll be looking at some examples of solutions reporting, as well as SoJo resources. And at the end, I'll be sharing the feedback survey QR code for you to please kindly scan and complete towards the end of this session. So as we begin, if you can please share into the chat function here on Zoom, what is it that you think or believe is solutions journalism? There is no right or wrong answer. This is just to gauge your sense of what solutions journalism is or what you expect it to be. And this is going to assist us within this discussion to see where are we in terms of our understanding and where our speakers as well can be able to inform further from this grounding understanding. So please do share within the chat, the webinar chat function, what is it that you believe or think or understand solutions journalism is. I will give you just a minute, please. And so as you think through that, and please feel free to keep popping those inputs into the chat and Q&A functions, solutions journalism basically is reliant on four main pillars, and that is response, insight, evidence, as well as limitations. And what solutions journalism presents is a rigorous and compelling reporting, which is about responses to social problems. Now, when we speak of response, we refer to the focus on a response to a social problem that the story or reporting presents and how that response has worked within society or why it hasn't worked. Within insight, we refer to what can be learned from a response and why it matters to the newsroom audience. Within evidence, this is where we look for data and qualitative results that inform and indicate the effectiveness or the lack thereof of the response that is being reported. And then lastly, with limitations, this places responses in context. And so it doesn't shy away from revealing the shortcomings of the responses that have been put in place, but also placing them in context and understanding how they came about. Please do feel free to ask questions as we're moving along, should you need to get more clarity. So solutions journalism, the common mistake that is often alluded to it is that it is just about good news. And we want to reiterate and emphasize that it isn't about good news, but it is about evidence. So within the examples of a SoJo story, the first is of Baltimore residents, which were reported on mobilizing to protect their immigrant neighbors from ICE. And this was published in the Baltimore Beat in July 2025. So we're going to unpack how this story meets the four pillars of solutions journalism, which is response, insight, evidence, and limitations. And what I commonly find to be most useful in order for you to be able to tell whether a story is a solutions journalism story is to break your page into four parts where you have your response, insight, evidence, and limitations, and find those key elements within the story itself. And if you can find all four, then that story meets all four pillars of solutions journalism. So let's look into this example. In terms of response to a social problem, and this PowerPoint presentation will be shared, so you will be able to look into the hyperlinks to each of the articles that are shared for your own homework or reference. Now, in terms of response to a social problem, the article looks within the middle section of the article, we're able to see how the report describes residents in a Baltimore neighborhood and the grassroots defense work that is being done in response of the raids that are being undertaken, and how neighbors are going door to door, giving out information to members of society to know your rights. And this is the core of solutions journalism, having showing a community-led initiative that is designed to protect the immigrant neighbors facing the enforcement actions. In terms of evidence, the story shows how there are specific measurable outcomes and signs of impact. We see how there's over 86 residents now participating in secure communities. And further on, we have reference of the city council funding and how these immigration services and legal defense services have been availed to enforce and enhance policy outcomes that are going to mobilize communities to the safety of immigrants. Thirdly, for insights into how and why it works, the report looks at tactics and explains why strategy matters and how it functions. So we see and we learn about how organizing neighbors, building trusted local communications works and in order to put across warnings, and it offers varied participation options from observing to documenting, and this helps to reduce the fear amongst residents. In terms of then the fourth element of solutions journalism, which is limitations, the report provides a discussion of how much the neighbor's intervention was not successful at stopping the specific detention, the underscoring the limits of the untrained community defense. And so, in as much as you show the response that community or organizations or stakeholders are providing in your report, it is then required to reflect on the limitations of that response in order to provide a nuanced report that captures all four pillars of solutions journalism. We also see this, and so in closing and analyzing this example, we find that the story features a real response to a social problem. It does not emphasize the problem, but the response itself. And it doesn't just present a description of the problem. It also provides evidence of the effectiveness and doesn't just give claims. And thirdly, it offers insights into how and why the responses work. And then it discusses the limitations and the complexity of the response and the situation at hand. Therefore, the story meets all four pillars of response, evidence, insight, and limitations to solutions journalism. So these are the pillars that are key to your assessment and implementation of solutions journalism. Another example is a story published in Kenya, sorry, on Maasai Conservancy that use private lands to protect Kenya's wildlife corridors. I won't go into detail of this article, but following the framework that we used for the previous article, you can be able to break the article into 4 sections where you outline or assess its response, its evidence, insight, and limitations in order to see how it is an example of a solutions journalism story. What I liked about this article is the evidence that was presented, which was greatly qualitative, and that the journalist took, excuse me, the journalist took geographic presentations from 2016 and compared it to a landscaping in 2025, presenting a very in-depth analysis of evidence showing how changes have come about from 2016 to 2025. That is very crucial evidence. And in telling a solutions journalism story, you need to think about the evidence that you present and aim to have a very in-depth or qualitative reporting of your evidence in showing the response, its impact, as well as how it has affected the society and community. These are just more of examples on solutions journalism reporting from the continent, and they fall under various themes such as environment and community solutions, women's health and empowerment, technology and public health, health and social innovation. And you can use these in order to assess against your own reporting, as well as understand what goes into an exemplary solutions journalism story. These are furthermore screen grabs of the articles that are referred, coming from various publications, from national to local to community publications that are telling stories in a solutions kind of perspective. And then some solutions journalism resources that you can be able to access in order to gain more information, more knowledge, and also to share your own solution stories. So you can go into the Solutions Journalism Network website. The sections are hyperlinked, so you can be able to open the pages once you are in receipt of the presentation. And there's also the SoJo Africa Summit, which was held last year in November. And there you can find some useful resources on reporting of solutions that was held in Nigeria last year. Further, you can share or look into other publications of solutions journalism from the Story Tracker by the Solutions Journalism Network. There are over 17,000 stories that have been produced by over 9,000 journalists, and these are also available in a range of different languages, over 19 languages, and stemming through 102 countries throughout the globe. So this offers a really great tool and info pack, and as well as a resource for you to have some examples, learning tools, as well as to be able to share your own stories that you have published and produced on solutions. In terms of training education, you can also look into the Solutions Journalism Network toolkits and guides, which are offered in 18 different languages, as well as an online course by Academy Africa on reporting on endemic problems using solutions journalism, and that is in partnership with Code for Africa. And so on the right-hand side of the screen is screenshots of these toolkits and the different topical areas that they also fall into. So whether you are focusing on health stories or educational stories or economic stories or stories around gender violence, you can look into these guides and toolkits to be able to enhance the storytelling that you are adopting within your newsrooms and publications. And so I will share the screen again at the end of the session, but please do scan this QR code to provide us feedback on the impact of this session towards building your knowledge and understanding on solutions journalism. Thank you so much once again, and I'm happy to take questions. You are more than welcome to share them now, and then we will engage them once we have heard from our two guest speakers. Thank you so much. And I will now hand over to Mary Mwendwa, who is going to be speaking to us and presenting some editorial perspectives on solutions journalism. Thank you so much, Mary, and over to you.
Thank you, Bongiwe. Good morning, everyone. I believe it's morning where you are, and happy to be here. Good morning, Churchill. Churchill was my president at the Kenya Editors Guild. He's now proceeded to another field, to another space now. So thank you so much. Let me just share my presentation. Okay. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Lovely, lovely. So to start with, my name is Mary Mwendwa. I'm an editor for an online publication called Talk Africa, based here in Nairobi, Kenya. And I'll be talking about how SoJo stories are told and from the editorial perspective, from where I sit at Talk Africa. I know we are flooded with news about what's broken, the gridlock, the crises, and failure. But our job, as Bongiwe started with her presentation, is not just to point out problems, but is to illuminate and put a path forward. So today we'll explore how to find solutions to stories in our everyday reporting, how to apply investigative rigor to them, and even how to pitch and publish journalism that does not just inform, but inspires and impacts. So thank you so much, and we proceed to my presentation. Bongiwe has extensively explained what SoJo journalism is, so I'll not go into detail around this area. Again, she's touched on this, finding the story, the positive deviant. And as journalists, when we are dealing with SoJo stories, we don't just start by looking for cool projects. We start with a problem that we are already covering. Like now in Kenya, we have this HIV drug. It's called lenacapavir, that was launched this week, and it's a 6-month injection to prevent HIV/AIDS. And we were just laughing with my colleague, I think yesterday, and we were talking to each other, and we were just saying this is purely a SoJo story because it is now an intervention in prevention against HIV/AIDS. And of course, there'll be some challenges and all that. So we were just saying this is another SoJo story that has come on our desks. And we'll see how journalists will navigate around it and tell stories around this injection that has come to prevent HIV infections in Kenya. So the injection will be 6 months and then 6 months. So per year, someone will be able to get the 2 injections. So we'll see how journalists will navigate through this whole idea of lenacapavir and see how they'll navigate and churn out your stories. So apart from that, we look for the outlier, and then we look for interventions and how they are working. Again, the example of this injection. With HIV, there are other interventions. Condoms and other things. There are many.
Sorry, Mary, I think you are disconnecting there.
It's not stable. Oh, sorry. Where did you lose me?
You were still talking about the HIV prevalence among the youths.
Okay. So I was saying Kenya has now launched the injectable drug that will help in preventing HIV. And the drug is called lenacapavir, which is a 6 months injection that people who are HIV negative will be taking to help them prevent HIV. And so we were talking with a colleague of mine saying this is purely a SoJo story because it is something that is coming in Kenya to help people prevent themselves against HIV infections. So we are just saying we would like to see how stories will come out around this area because it's now really new and people will start getting the injection in March. And we were happy because it was a purely SoJo story. And SoJo, as Mbogiwe said during her presentation, it cuts across many aspects. And this is a purely health SoJo story. And in that line, when we are doing SoJo stories, we look for the outlier. And here I mean we look for the interventions and how they are working. And then we look for real world examples. Now, the HIV injection is a real world example because now HIV is known by everyone across the world. It's affecting many in the world. And having this kind of injection to help in prevention is something that many would like to see. Many will be interested to test. Many will be interested to know how this injection is working. And I gave an example of another SoJo, like a reporter who is doing a series on how persistent drought is and is affecting the country's agricultural system. Again, I'll give an example here in Kenya. We have many places where there is a lot of drought, even currently, but now there is some rain. So a journalist reporting on drought and how it is affecting the country's agricultural economy is still part of a SoJo story, and them going to a local farmer, talking to them, seeing how they are using interventions, see how green and healthier maybe his neighbor's farm is, and just churning a story in how this farmer is using other interventions to be able to fight drought. And then another thing we need to remember when doing SoJo stories is talking to your sources. And here, sources, I mean people who will make the story more credible, more interesting. And sources are always key. They are the people who are working, they are the people who are having those kind of innovations, the people involved in the interventions, the people who are doing some kind of work that is positive, maybe to the community. And as we said earlier on, doing SoJo stories, you still apply the investigative rigor. And by investigating we mean that we do not shatter any myth that solution stories are soft. When you say solutions, someone may think they are soft, maybe they are PR, or they're just stories that are flat, that do not have any investigative nature. But in journalism, as we do stories, most of the time we investigate. And that is something people sometimes forget. Because when you are asking questions, that is still part of an investigation. When you look for documents from archives, when you ask questions beyond what people know, is still an investigation. An example is in the health and reporting area. where journalists dig into journals, journalists dig into academic papers, journalists ask scientists, doctors, researchers, clinicians questions. That is still part of an investigation. So SoJo stories, they will always follow the investigative rigor as when journalists do other investigative stories. And then we treat it as a hypothesis. Approach every solution story as a hypothesis to be tested. You test the claim, and here we mean that here is the evidence that you need to prove. Verify everything. In terms of verifying here, we mean things like data. We have sites and places where you can get credible data. Government institutions have credible data. We have data from World Bank. We have data from WHO. We have data from UN agencies like UNICEF. You know, there are many places that have credible data that can be verified. And even local governments, like here in Kenya, we have county governments. They always collect data. Verify that kind of data they have. Is it credible and all that? And then report as if no one believes what you are reporting. Assume maybe only your mother and your best friend trust what you found. This forces you to gather overwhelming proof. Make sure you gather as much as information as you can, because as a journalist, when you gather little information, it blocks you from exploring and navigating to the story from a larger perspective. So gather everything as much as you can, and from that gathering, you will be able to document a good, appealing story that will fall into the SoJo docket. Use public documents. There are public documents in libraries, audits, government institutions, and all that. Pitching is something that is very common in newsrooms. And when we say pitching, is you as a journalist talking to your editor or explaining to the editor in writing the kind of story you want to do. And most of the time, editors are naturally wary of PR stories or good traps or good news traps. These are stories that, like you are featuring a company that is doing something. And most of the time, Churchill has been an editor, will tell you, we like see a PR story from far. From the first or second sentence, we already know this is a PR story. So we are always wary of such stories. But a solution story or a solution speech from a journalist, we usually look for context. And as an editor, this isn't a magic bullet. When you mention in the pitch itself the challenges, the complexity up front, it makes an editor know what kind of story you want to pursue. And then Bongiwe talked about the three fundamental, she didn't talk about it, but there are the three fundamentals in journalism. Why the story matters now, why is this story important, and why are you best suited to pursue this story? And again, as a journalist, don't shy away. You don't even have to call it solutions journalism. In the pitching itself, an editor will be able to see this is a solutions journalism, this is a solutions story. So you don't need to put there the title solutions story. Just the way you pitch, the words you will use, how you will explain yourself is enough in itself for your editor to know this is a solutions-based story. And just pitch a story about a response that has evidence behind it. An editor will be able to know this is a SoJo story. When we come to editing and publishing for impact, the editor's role is like the second brain. The challenge is always to look for the blind spots and ensure clarity. You know, I've also been a journalist and I'm still writing at some point. When you do a story, there's a lot that you gather and also the flow of thought as a journalist. So you put a lot of content and all that. So a journalist
Mary, I think if
narrow the
you can.
focus.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. You can continue.
Okay, sorry. I think my internet is
I was
all
to
right.
suggest if maybe you can switch off your camera, it might help
Oh
lessen the load.
yeah. Great. Thank you, Bongiwe.
Thank you.
So yeah, let me pick up from where I was talking about the editor's role, where the editor is the one who ensures clarity of the story. And then we narrow into the focus. Most of the time, you find a journalist has done a story, but maybe the focus is a bit mixed up or it's not clear. So an editor's role is always to narrow into the focus, and this helps the story become more clearer, and then help the reporter find the minimum publishable story. So our work is always to get the right focus and then make it compelling. Sometimes stories can come on our desks. Maybe it has data that is not being explained well. Maybe it has visuals that are not making sense. And so we make sure the story is compelling and has good narrative that maybe accompanies the data if the data is there, especially the visuals and all that. And then an editor, sometimes people assume we cut the stories, but sometimes we cut the stories or make them shorter to just make it more clearer, make it punchy, make it more appealing to the reader or the audience. And then fact checking is part of our work. Sometimes you can find a statement that you are not so sure, or like now, I gave you an example of the HIV drug that has already been launched in Kenya now. Maybe a reporter comes up with a statement that is not factual. Our role is to fact check. Sometimes you can even call the journalist to fact check, or an editor yourself, you fact check with the various sources like the Ministry of Health and all that. I think I'm done. And what I would like to say, to sum up, solutions journalism means finding stories that work. As I earlier said, investigating them like any other important story and editing them to be clearer and more powerful. And why does it matter? This isn't about being positive, it's about being complete. It gives our communities a roadmap. It holds power accountable, not just of what's broken, but for what could be fixed. And lastly, my call to action is that I challenge you on your beat this week. Find a problem you are covering and ask, where is the response? And how do we know if it's working? And that is the future of impactful media.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you for that
Thank you.
presentation and for
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
thank
you.
you
Thank you.
for giving us practical examples as well as the application of solutions journalism in our newsrooms. And I really like that call to action to our attendees to find a problem or to even look to their previous publications. I think they can challenge themselves by going back to their previous publications, see where they've identified the problem and how they can turn that around into telling a solutions story. So thank you so much, Mary. And now we're going to be hearing from Churchill Odieno, the president of the African Editors Forum. Thereafter, we're going to have a Q&A and discussion session, taking questions from our attendees, and as well as questions that have already been shared upon registration. So thank you so much, Churchill, and over to you.
Thank you, Bongiwe. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. It's a good morning from Nairobi, and I hope you are all doing fine. Very, very instructive opening from Bongiwe earlier, and I think very clear examples of application from Mary. So much so that I see my session more as a way of summing up. And I'd like to sum up really by highlighting 3 key points or key factors that I see as standing out from the 2 presentations so far. One, I believe that the definition hopefully now is a lot more shared and a lot more clear. But that the key takeaway for me is that solutions journalism, sometimes people want to think of it as a separate desk or beat, so to speak. But I think it's emerging clearly that it is not a beat, it is not anything else, except it is an approach to reporting. And that in this approach, we focus on investigating how people, institutions, or communities are responding to a defined social problem. No? And that we do this by examining the evidence on how far the responses go in helping these communities, these people, these institutions. So if that is taken, 3 things then stand out for me that I would like to discuss a little bit. One is, how do we find solution stories in everyday reporting? Be it sports, be it crime, be it court, be it politics. How do we find those stories? Secondly, I'd like to talk a little bit on the investigative rigor that solutions journalism asks of us. Because if we agree it's an approach, then the question then becomes, what standards of reporting does that approach ask of us? Then I'll finish by some comments, add to some comments on what Mary has said about pitching, editing, and publishing these stories. So to open onto those 3 areas, a key foundation for me that I believe should be a constant question that any journalist asks themselves as they go on in the journalism is the whole need or goal or objective that meets the requirement for accuracy in reporting. But as we go about doing solution journalism, I find that what standards is asked of us help in many journalists being able to then deliver accurate reporting. Because to use Mary's words, as a journalist, the more you gather, the more information you gather, the higher the chance that you get to understand the subject matter, that you're able to then, tease out the key insights out of it, but more importantly, also see the different sides to a story, as it were. So if solutions journalism is not a separate bit, it's a discipline applied to any bit. How might we then find these stories? One, whatever story idea we have, I think solutions journalism invites us to not focus so much on the person, but focus a lot more on the issue, so that we do less of personality reporting. So it's not so much about who did what, but what is the problem that is being addressed? So what is the issue in play? So it will not be about the Minister for Health, for example, but it will be about the health system. It will not be about the Minister for Youth. It will be about, for example, youth unemployment, or climate shocks, or corruption. So it invites you to focus on the issue, to make the issue your central pillar as you approach that story. And as you make the issue your main focus, it then invites you to ask yet one more editorial question, which is, who is trying something different? And is it working? I think the classical training gave many reporters the 5 Ws and the H. But SoJo now invites us to whatever story we are dealing with, we must go a step further and ask who is trying something different in solving that issue. And go to the next question, which is it working? I think very, very critical. And for those of us who are already editors or who expect or are preparing to be editors, the key question to ask as you pitch these stories or debrief from colleagues is there credible response worth interrogating? So if there's a new approach to managing HIV patients in Kenya, as Mary has shared, I think clearly the issue there is a health issue, and the intervention is seeking ways to reduce HIV burden. So here we do have a response in that there's a new approach to medication that has come into Kenya. As a reporter, in my news meeting, I'll be asking, is that approach working? If it's just new in Kenya, maybe it's been used elsewhere. Could we get, illustrations, some cases from those places on how it has worked in those areas? So very, very key. The second issue that I'd like to talk about, as mentioned, is the invitation that SoJo gives us to apply investigative rigor. If I could use different words, is the invitation to seek evidence, whatever claims are being made about this issue. And this is where the distinction emerges from the claim that SoJo is about good news. I think those who claim that don't know enough, because at its very core, SoJo is about accountability being applied to the responses that are being invested in different social problems. So as journalists who choose to pursue this approach in reporting, I think Bugiwe gave us a very, very good framework with which then to analyze those issues. Yeah, and I will not repeat that in the interest of time. But if we might then step back and look at the African context as it were, when it comes to social problems, you will, for example, find that in many of the social problems, we do have donor-funded interventions or pilots or projects, whatever you want to call it. I think a key invitation for us there would be to ask a question: what happens when the donor moves away? It's a key question that used to be idealistic, but today is very, very real. Because, for example, the USAID was a major donor in many of these problems, but it has now walked away. So this question is no longer just a theoretical one. It's a very, very real question that should generate lots of story ideas for us. I know, for example, in Kenya, the health budget, a big chunk of it, I forget the ratio now, but I think it's slightly more than half, was supported by donors, and a big chunk of that one was held by USAID. So it's a real question for Kenyan journalists today to ask, what happens to the Kenyan health system now that USAID has walked away? The third leg that I'd like to reinforce a little bit is the whole space of pitching, editing, and publishing. It really speaks to, as a reporter, how do I market my story to an editor in a way that the editor sees that this story truly is publishable and that it can make a difference to his or her product. For questions that I think should guide you as you think through your pitch. Always remembering that the editor would respond to clarity. The first question is, what is the problem? And remember, we are talking about issues that are social problems. So there has to be sufficient clarity on what that problem is and how it connects to the community, to society, to institutions, whatever stakeholders are connected to it. The second question is, what is the response? What is being done about this issue? Similarly, there has to be fair clarity on what is being done. The third one is, for me, even more critical. What proof do I, as a reporter, have to the problem and to the response? And finally, Bongiwe told us what are the limitations that are apparent. I guess from talking to different sources, the affected, the duty bearers, we should be able to know, define, and describe what those limitations are. When I talk to colleagues who are currently running newsrooms, their sense is that when stories are delivered using the SoJo approach, they tend to connect better with their audiences. So the audience engagement is higher. And thanks to digital tools, I think it's easier today to measure these things. So critically, it shows that the more we deliver on SoJo, the higher the chance that we attract audiences, and not just attract them, but also retain them, which is a key. These are key metrics for audience happiness and public trust of the work that we do. So Bongiwe, without taking too much time, those are the points I wanted to just highlight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Churchill. Thank you for giving us those examples and ways in which journalists can produce solutions reports. And thank you for sharing some solution stories in everyday reporting on how to apply investigative rigor to solutions, as well as the processes towards pitching, editing, and publishing solutions journalism stories. I do like your comment in the end on how there is evidence that through solutions journalism stories, there's much more engagement on the issues and responses that are being reported. And this is an indication that we need to deliver more on these stories. So I think that can lead us into our discussion. And I will start there with you, Churchill, towards that last point. We have seen that there is an enhancement of engagement through these stories. But is there an appetite to report from an editorial point of view? Is there an appetite for a solutions journalism report? Or is it more leaning towards breaking stories, shock value stories? Just give us from an editorial point of view the interest and appetite for solutions journalism stories.
A critical question there, and thank you, Bongiwe, for asking it. There is a conflicting of journalism and social media, if you ask me. And there are those who would like to call that second bit, social media, as what is that term again? I forget the term. I'll remember it in a minute. Which basically then leads many reporters to want to compete against social media posts. And by this, I mean you get a hint of what might be a story, and without putting sufficient effort to check and to verify, you allow yourself to get into the trap of wanting to be the first out with that story. What we call in Kenya a scoop, that reporters want to scoop one another. So there's always that mad rush to try and get something published. Sometimes, if you ask me way too many times, prematurely. And that's a culture issue. Is a professional practice issue. I think the newsroom leaders and the journalists that we talk to, we keep telling them that you don't have a story until you have the evidence of that story. So until you verify pieces of information that may have come to you by one way or another, until you independently verify and are able to demonstrate that this information is accurate, you actually don't have a story, and therefore you cannot commit anything to get published. As we've seen in this call, there are very clear benchmarks, the very clear milestones that a good solution story should have and should check. Creating a habit, a practice, and an newsroom culture where these, as a matter of course, standards that we ask ourselves and our colleagues to meet, I think will go a long way. And we've seen that it's also good for business, because the more we frame stories using the SoJo template, the higher that our audiences get to trust us and get to see the story that we give them as valuable and stories that speak to their reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Churchill. And Mary, to you as well, and on that note by Churchill, that it's good for business. What is your experience as editor at Talk Africa and in the pitches, in the stories that are pitched and proposed by journalists? Are they framed as solutions journalism stories, or do you find that you need to assist your reporters to be able to take it in that direction? How does it come to you as an editor? What have you experienced in terms of the appetite or the pitches that are coming from reporters?
Thank you, Bongiwe. The appetite and the approach comes in two fronts. Quite a number of journalists pitch without knowing they're pitching a SoJo story. So during the pitching level, the pillars, you find maybe a pillar is missing. You can actually see this is a SoJo, but you realize a pillar is missing. So at the pitching level, as an editor, that is where I come in and help them make the story fall into the SoJo category. So we have a dialogue, a discussion, and tell them this is what you need to do. If it is an intervention, you ask questions. Is it working? What are the shortcomings? Do you have data? Such questions. And then we refine together. The appetite also for SoJo, it depends on where the journalist is based. You realize, in Kenya, we have counties, and these counties are like provinces. I believe you understand them. You find reporters from those areas are more inclined to news stories. News stories take shorter time, and the sources are always available. Those quick sources. A governor is standing in a forum, they are doing a presentation, you can talk to them after. SoJo stories take time. A journalist can even spend a week on a SoJo story, or even more. Earlier on, I said in my presentation that the more you gather, the better for you as a journalist. So you realize some journalists shy away from this kind of stories because, it will take you through all the principles of reporting. You will need to verify the data. You will need to talk to sources. And Churchill can tell you, I believe even in South Africa, in the scientific field, sources are not always available. We've talked about this HIV drug. The researchers, the doctors, they will not be always available on time. They can take you in rounds and rounds and rounds, and that needs a lot of patience from the journalists. So at times you find the journalists will want to rely more on the quick news stories because they're easier to do. They don't take a lot of time. Even in logistical planning, you find there's less time. So you find it's easier for them to quickly pitch those news stories. But again, from the editorial, what I usually advise journalists is those are stories that are impactful. Those are stories that give you they give you a name as a journalist, because you might be seated in South Africa, maybe in Johannesburg, and have written a SoJo story about an intervention working here in Kenya that can actually work in South Africa. So you see, as a reader in Johannesburg, if it is a digital platform, you will love to read and see, who is this writer writing about this? So SoJo stories on my end opens more opportunities for the journalist, because at Talk Africa, we work with freelancers. You find more opportunities, people are getting to know their work, and they're impactful. And those are kind of stories, sometimes you find them winning good awards, global, So that is what I observe. But as we progress in this field, we keep telling journalists to pursue SoJo stories, because there's hope in SoJo. And our audiences are always saying, we are tired of bad stories. We are tired of stories money has been stolen. We are tired of seeing people who are in misery. So those are the kind of issues that we handle in day-to-day life as we pursue these SoJo stories. Thank you, Bongiwe.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you for that grounding of the editorial experience. Before you go off camera, there's a question from Jacqueline Monjaru, who is, while we're on the topic of data gathering, is asking, good morning, what happens when you can't find data from relevant sites? What can you do? So what advice could we present to Jacqueline with that challenge while undertaking a SoJo story?
When it comes to data, there's always data that is always available. Sometimes I mentioned about credible data sites like from WHO, World Bank, and all that. Those ones are always there. You just need good navigation, knowing where to get the data, the right category, and all that. But again, as a journalist, sometimes it happens you are not able to get data due to one reason or another. Number one, governments are always, they cling to their data. Governments will say we are open, but in the real sense, they are not open, especially when a journalist tries to ask hard questions. Data is always not available. From the word go, it is never open. There is data that you cannot access. There is data as a journalist that you need, more wisdom, more lobbying, so that you are able to access that data. Number one, have right contacts and networks. When you are reporting in a beat that you are known, if a governor is not able to point you to a data set, look for someone within the same county government. They'll be able to give you data. Always find other ways to get that data, because always you will not get the data, especially government data is always, they will say, during functions, for PR purposes, our data is open. But in true sense, data is never open. It is just, you see, the summary of things. But when you try to go into deep issues, you will always find that data is not there. Nobody is willing to give you. So as a journalist, build the right networks, know who to ask for when you are not getting the right data. That is what I can say, because there is never easy data to get. That kind of data that you find on websites is never all the data. Real data is being held by someone in an institution. Real data is being held by, so it's upon you as a journalist to work with networks. If health journalists, have a network where you belong, ask around those networks, and even the networks within your sources. Somehow they'll be able to point you to someone who will be able to give you that kind of data. And as I said earlier, SoJo stories take quite some time. Be patient. Look for it patiently. Ask in a very good manner. Don't look like you are demanding and commanding. You are the one in need, not the other person. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mary. That is indeed true. On networks and connections and contacts, it is important to know who you ask for when you are trying to get that data. So I hope, Jacqueline, that is very sufficient. I think that was a great response from Mary on how to go about that challenge in finding data from relevant sites. And then we also have another question, Churchill. I think you can lead us to responding to it. The question is of what does solutions journalism look like in practice for small community-based digital newsrooms? And this is from a reporter from Mpumalanga who has started a small digital news platform.
Words are powerful. The first bit of that is I'm trying to wrap my head around what a small newsroom is. In the previous life,
it would probably be focused on a specific community. So they're referring to a Komati village in that province.
Yeah, so in a previous life, it might mean that you have a small team, for example, that you only have few journalists doing this. But when you interrogate that a lot more, you find that in a digital world, really there's no small, that wherever you choose to operate in, you can be so detailed and so clear and so focused that that in of itself begins to demonstrate bigness, whatever that means. But what does it look like doing SoJo in a small community? I would say exactly what it looks like doing SoJo at a national level. Remember, we said SoJo is not a bit, it's an approach. So because the target audience is a community, if, for example, you chose to do a story on a bridge that influences the lives of the people who live in this community, you would apply the template in the exact same way, by defining what is the problem, and basically applying the criteria that Pongiwe gave us at the beginning of today's session. And remember, it is an approach. It's a way of reporting. So it goes for whichever social issue you choose to take. It might be that in that community, the commission, for example. So for our template, as discussed, will guide you to first lock onto what is the problem, what is the issue, then what is the evidence of that issue, and what is the response, and how far is that response delivering? What are the limitations, for example? So that framework goes regardless of the scale of your audience or your operation as a newsroom. That's what I can say.
Thanks so much, Churchill. I'm not sure if you have something to add to that, Mary. You can go ahead, please.
Thank you, Bongiwe. What I would like to say in regards to small or community newsrooms, the principles in journalism remain the same. Despite your outlet, despite your channel, even if it is a community radio in a vernacular language, even if it is a national radio, the principles remain the same. The storytelling techniques remain the same. So you cannot change them because it's a small community media. No, the principles remain the same, even for SoJo stories. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you've both really summed it up nicely that in a digital world, there is no small. And I really like that from Churchill, and as well from yourself, Mary, that the principles remain the same. So thank you for that response to the questions by our attendees. And then let's take some closing remarks before we end the session. I think, Churchill, if you can come back again, and in summary, in closing, what are we looking forward to for solutions journalism in the African context?
Uh, SoJo serves a critical requirement of journalism, if you ask me. One, we currently have a surplus in terms of supply of information. There is an information overload, regardless of the issue that one is seeking to look at. All manner of sources, spewing out information every second, every minute. To the extent that a lot of the people who want to read our stories, to view our stories, to listen to our stories, are already buffeted by all manner of claims from elsewhere. So the question for me, and I want to believe for many of us, is how might we ride up the value chain so that the products of journalism are a lot more critical and are a lot more distinguishable in terms of quality. And I believe that applying the SoJo principles, applying the SoJo framework consistently can help journalists ensure that when their story is eventually turned out and delivered, published, that story makes a difference. And that for a long time, people will find it useful and will keep coming to our journalism. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. How do we ride up the value chain? Thank you so much for that, Churchill. Mary, your final reflections.
Okay, thank you. Mine would be there's a growing appetite for information across the globe. People are always looking for solutions to their problems. And in the era of many digital advancements, things to do with AI, things to do with citizen journalism, blogging, social media, a SoJo story goes beyond all that. A SoJo story has work that goes into it, and that gives a journalist credibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you once again to our guest speakers, Mary Mwendwa, editor of Talk Africa, as well as Churchill Otieno, the president of the African Editors Forum. We really appreciate your insights and bringing in those editorial perspectives to solutions journalism within the African context as well. And I want to remind our attendees of the 4 pillars to solutions journalism, which have been repeated throughout this session. Firstly, the first pillar, which is response, that focuses on a response to a social problem and how that response has worked or why it happens or why it hasn't worked in that community. Secondly, insight. You need to show what can be learned from that response and why it matters to a newsroom's audience. Thirdly, giving evidence. That's where you provide your data or qualitative results that indicate the effectiveness or lack thereof of the response that has been implemented or adopted. And lastly, the limitations as expanded by our speakers as well. It's very important to reflect on the context of the limitations that were seen from the responses and not shy away from revealing these shortcomings. And that is what makes a very strong solutions journalism report when you have applied those 4 pillars in your reporting. And before we close, I will put on screen again the QR code for you to please complete the survey on your findings of this webinar and how useful it has been to your learning and understanding of solutions journalism. And before I put up that screen while we close, let me say thank you once more to our speakers, Churchill and Mary, and also to our attendees. Thank you so much for your engagements with us. And we trust that you've learned quite a lot of depth from this engagement. This recording will also be available on our social platforms, on our YouTube, as well as on our website, where you can refer to it again as you learn further, try to understand and apply, and looking for examples of solutions journalism stories. So thank you once again, colleagues, and may you all have a lovely day further. I'm going to put up the screen for a few minutes for you to scan the QR code to complete the survey of this webinar, and we'll also be sharing this code on our website. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.